Zelensky wants Russia removed from the Security Council, and he provided graphic evidence to back his demand. A warning, the images he showed and you're about to watch, they're disturbing. Allan Rock previously served as Canada's ambassador to the United Nations. He's now Professor Emeritus of the University of Ottawa. Hi, Professor Rock. Really good to have you back on the program.
Thank you. Great to be here.
The point that President Zelensky was making to the UN was essentially, questioning its purpose, its existence, given what Russia has done to Ukraine. Do you think the point he's making is a fair one?
Not only fair, it's long overdue. Many of us have tried to make that point, but no one with the moral authority and the stature of President Zelensky this morning. It was very powerful. And Vashi, Canada has been saying for years that the Security Council is unrepresentative to the point of lacking legitimacy, that the vetoes are fatal to the effectiveness of the UN system, and that something's got to change in a major way. The way to clear the room is to talk about UN reform, because nothing is more boring. Few things are more important. But when President Zelensky uses the extraordinary platform that he has as a result of his prominence, the courage of his people, the dramatic nature of their current situation, to express that message and to show, what clearer indication can there be than the absurd situation of a permanent member of the Security Council there to uphold international peace and security, itself violating the most fundamental rules in the UN Charter? Something has to change. That message today was very powerful.
I think the logical follow-up is, then what now? How does change become possible? Can it?
Well, it's not going to happen in the Security Council, I'll tell you that, because that council is hamstrung, it's paralyzed, it's dysfunctional for the very reasons we've been talking about. It has to happen in the Assembly of States, the General Assembly. And as President Zelensky said, we have to pull together a meeting of all member states. The P5 can come if they want to, but all member states have to have, well, first of all, they need leadership. Somebody's got to step forward. Zelensky's a great candidate, but countries like Canada should be behind him as well, because we've been preaching this for years. And we should have a new formula to propose. It's going to be messy. It's not going to be easy. We may end up keeping the P5 with their vetoes, but adding to that, a Security Council with membership and a distribution of membership that's truly representative of the world's population and geopolitics today, and therefore has some legitimacy. Canada made a proposal years ago about increasing the permanent seats, not permanent members, but permanent seats, and allowing the member states in each region to vote by election which of their regional states would occupy those seats and for how long. So you might have an asymmetrical situation with the African seats having Nigeria or Kenya or South Africa on for a longer period, the smaller states for a shorter period, but elected by Africa, elected by each region. If you had that globally, even if you grafted it on to the P5 with their veto, if you also extracted a commitment from the P5 only to use the veto in very restrained circumstances, only when their real national interests were really imperiled, I think you might have some progress. And I wonder whether this crisis and the dramatic illustration by Russia of the absurdity of the present arrangement might be enough to bring the member states to their senses and bring about real reform.
Yeah, as you're speaking, I thought to myself, and if not at this moment, what then? And also, just given the constant scrutiny over the legitimacy of the UN, because of what you mentioned, what you outlined, the period of time through which people have been saying this isn't working and a failure to act. If there is no action now, what does that do to the legitimacy?
Well, that's right. And 2011, the Syrian civil war started. 2015, Russia became involved at the side of that murderer, Bashar al-Assad. Russia has been bombing schools and hospitals, children and civilians for the last 7 years in Syria. Not a peep from anybody. The Security Council completely silent because Russia vetoed any action. In Myanmar, a genocide of the Rohingya carried out by the Myanmar military. Once again, not a peep out of the Security Council because China is there to protect its proxy in Myanmar. So there's a pattern here of almost immoral inactivity, outrageous inactivity because of the conflict of interest of P5, who allow their national allegiances and interests to override their international obligations.
I also wanted to get you to weigh in on, beyond what's happening in the UN, what countries like Canada are pursuing in response to what we've seen, not only over the last 3 days that Russia has done, but in the 6 weeks prior. And by that I mean, the sanctions that were levied in concert and continue to be levied. Yes, there is that. Certainly, the lethal aid provided, the humanitarian aid. But we also see on the converse, the Russian dollar has almost bounced back to where it was before the war. That we see they're still selling gas and oil, and Putin's popularity, according to the few independent polls that have been done, has actually increased since the outset of the war. What implications of all that are there for a country like Canada in determining what its response will be going forward?
Well, two things, Vashi. First of all, in terms of the ruble and its value internationally, the fact of the matter is that Putin and Russia are still selling an enormous amount of oil and gas through the European corridor. And I think it's a bit much for us to ask European countries to turn off that tap completely and immediately. They have to worry about the public reaction in their own countries, the stability of their own economies. We can wean them off it over time, but it's not going to happen overnight. And as long as Putin has those billions of dollars of revenue coming in from oil and gas, that gives him, I think, some options. Now, there are intelligence reports that he is finding it difficult to afford the maintenance of such a large military force outside the country. That's an expensive operation. As to his personal popularity, don't forget that his consumers are getting a brand of the news that is completely foreign to you and me. They're being told lies, and anybody who tries to tell the truth faces 15 years imprisonment. The media has been completely taken over. There are no longer any independent media outlets in Russia. So if you tell the people of the nation one version of the story, and that's the only version, and it glorifies the troops at a time of conflict, it's not surprising that there would be widespread support for Putin, but surely it cannot last because reality is going to break through. As to what Canada and allies are doing, Vashi, you know that we're very actively involved in the sanctions. And last week, I appeared before a Senate committee considering legislation, which is now past second reading, which would take things a step farther. This legislation, proposed by Senator Ahmedvar and coming out of a recommendation from the World Refugee and Migration Council, would allow the government of Canada not only to freeze the assets of the oligarchs, but to confiscate them, take the cash, and repurpose it for the benefit of Ukrainian refugees in Hungary and Poland and elsewhere. So it would be using the oligarchs' money against them and for the benefit of the people that they're complicit in displacing. I think that would be a very large step forward, and we hope it passes through the Senate soon and goes to the House for the government's consideration.
Okay, Professor Rock, I'll leave it there. Appreciate your insights as always. Thank you.
Nice to speak with you, Vashi. Great to have you back.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.